a lot of information to share with you. I'm going to challenge some of your beliefs and some of your ideas. I'm going to probably turn some of your worlds upside down because this is a completely new way of thinking. And I literally, when I got involved with this, had to throw everything I thought I knew out the window and start all over again, which can be a little bit challenging, but when I explain to you why, you'll get it. So basically, I'm going to go through how I got involved with it, the current concepts about mitochondrial medicine and the new paradigm. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the products. I'm going to show you the research on the Karnozin Extra and why it is so incredibly important and very different from anything else you're ever going to find. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the heart rate variability that we use for testing, which shows why it's the gold standard. And I'll show you a few clinical studies at the end. And if we've got some time, we can go through some questions and stuff. So I got involved with this through a practitioner ringing me up one day and going, hey, I've discovered this incredible mitochondrial therapy. You've got to get a load of it. It does this and this and this and this and this. And the reason he was calling me, one, because he knows I like to be at the cutting edge of things. But secondly, I have a son who's on the autism spectrum. At the time he was 16. And, you know, he was just going on about how amazing all of this stuff was. And I have a fairly sensitive BS monitor and went, just stop there. You know, nothing can be that good. Nothing can do all of that. Thank you very much, but just don't do that to me. So about 4 or 5 months later, he rang me and said, Lilias, you haven't done anything about this mitochondrial stuff. You really need to have a look at it. And so, you know, I love him dearly. I've known him for 20 years. He's a practitioner I really value. So I went, okay. He said, get in the car, come up and see me, bring your son, and I'll show you. Now, getting in the car to come and see him is a 4-hour round trip. And if any of you guys work with autism, you know that's actually quite challenging. So got in the car, went up there, and he performed heart rate variability on my son, who at the time was 16. The body was working pretty good, but there was nothing going on up here. And when I saw the results of the heart rate variability, I went, oh my God, that explains everything. Because all of his power was going into his fight or flight. We had virtually nothing going into his parasympathetic, his resting, digesting, and healing, and nothing virtually going into his brain. So no wonder the lights went on and nothing was happening. And so I went, wow, that explains why nothing has worked in, I don't know how many years that I've shoved every therapy, every supplement, everything down his throat that I possibly could. So Jonathan told me about the supplements we should take, and we did it. And within weeks of taking these supplements, he was saying things he'd never said before. He was behaving in a way that he was actually doing things for himself that he'd never done before. And I went, the brain's working. I've never had this before. My results were pretty pants. I thought I was okay at the time, but came up that I was really, really tired, as most autistic mums are. But when you see it in black and white, you go, okay, yeah, I have to admit that. And suddenly I'm going, I've got my mojo back. I can do stuff in the evening. I'm not walking around with my knuckles on the floor. And I'm going, wow, this stuff really, really does stuff. So at the time, I was doing very, very well. I had a practice in Somerset, which is southwest England. I had a practice in Harley Street in London, which many of you will be familiar with. And I went off and I trained to do this mitochondrial therapy work. And within about 18 months to 2 years, I ended up having a practice, a second practice in London, in Kingston, where I did purely autistic patients because the differences were so huge. I had a practice 4 hours north in London, in Cheshire. I spent a lot of time going on a sleeper train up to Scotland, which is the northern part of the country. I had another practice an hour away from where I live, and it just went bonkers. And the internet is a wonderful thing because people then started talking, going, I've had chronic fatigue and I'm feeling so much better, and my kid's doing this. And I got this phone call one day from this amazing philanthropist in Portland, Oregon, who basically said, can you fix my son? And I went, I don't know. I'll certainly have a go. I said, but you're an awfully long way away. And he said, well, I'll fly you over. I said, it's an awfully long way to come for one child, but great. He said, don't worry, I'll look after it. So I flew to Portland, worked with this amazing guy who then lined up a whole load of patients for me over the whole week. I did about 20 patients in a week. and then flew me home again. And the next result of that was I went back and forwards, all of which he was being a fabulous philanthropist, he paid for, and for half the patients, for about 4 or 5 trips. And that started me on going back and forth to the States. And so people were hearing about this stuff and going, we want some of it. And I realized that I couldn't continue running around the UK with a massive rucksack on my back, which I literally carried full of supplements, flying back and forth to the States. And I went, I've got to find some more practitioners to do this, because this is too good to be held onto by a few people. It has to be shared. And so Mitochondrial Rescue was incorporated, and here we are today. So, old paradigm. This is what you guys know. This is what you guys mostly live most of the time. A patient will come in and they'll go, I've got X, Y, and Z, or you will determine they have X, Y, and Z, liver, kidney, heart, spleen, whatever. And you will go, okay, you need this supplement, you need this therapy, what have you. You give it to them. If you're a half decent practitioner, they start to feel a lot better within a matter of weeks, couple of months. They go, great, I've got my mojo back. And then after a while, they go, it's great, I don't need my supplements, I don't need the therapy. They stop taking it. And then gradually, 4 to 6 months later, they go back to where they were in the first place. And the reason for this is because you treated a symptom. The body never had enough power in the first place to run that area, so it let it go. Now, let me explain that statement. When you're 16, remember it, you were invincible. Hopefully you partied, you drank, you stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning, you got away with it. And then hopefully, you know, your parents didn't know and you went trying to do it again. You may have done some slightly naughty things and thought you'd get away with that too. And the reason for this is because at 16, your potential to regenerate is off the scale. Your body's ability to create carnosine is greater at 16 than it will ever be again in your life. So therefore, your regeneration factor is extraordinary. We're reckless at 16. Let's be honest, what 16-year-old will listen to its parents? So when you get to about 25, 26, the relatives all start to say, they were such a wild child, they're so much nicer to be around now, they've calmed down. Well, the only reason you start to calm down in your mid-20s is because your body's ability to create carnosine is now falling away. You are now beginning to age very subtly. Your body doesn't have the same regeneration factor. It has to make some decisions. Sorry, you can't quite go and party like you used to. You're going to feel tired. When you get to 30, you think you're mature, you're having babies, you're getting a mortgage, you know, all of those sorts of things. And you think it's great. Well, I'm afraid this mature feeling is actually you getting older. Your carnosine is now dropping off and you're feeling it, but you don't know it yet. The big time comes in when you're 40. Everybody tells you they're tired, and they're telling you they're tired for 2 reasons. One, you're an awful lot further away from 16 than you were at 30. Your body is seriously making some decisions. You have a lot less power. Therefore, your body has to make some decisions. Doesn't quite have enough power. It's going to have to let the hormones go. It's going to have to let the methylation go. It might let the liver go. All of these things start to be breaking down or beginning to show themselves because the body is making choices about where the power is going to go. It's always going to go heart rate and respiration first. That will always overrule everything at the expense of every other system in the body. The other reason at 40 everybody tells you they're tired is because at 40 your body's ability to create CoQ10 is also falling off a cliff. And CoQ10 started falling off in your 30s, you weren't aware of it, but it's really showing it now in your 40s, and it's required for all of your cardiovascular disorders. So if you think about it, they're getting breathless, they can't walk upstairs like they did, or that great big hill that they used to walking up. They can't, they're getting the first symptoms of being anxious. Maybe some people are getting a little bit of atrial fibrillation, but the cardiovascular stuff starts to present normally in your 40s. Now, carnosine requires CoQ10 synergistically and biochemically to give it the power to regenerate you. So you can see there's a lot going on at 40. And when you hit 50, you have less than half the carnosine in your body than you did at 16. Therefore, you really are now degenerating. And so your body's really making some decisions. And if you think about it, most of the big labels come in post 50. Now that can all change. And it's going to change through these lovely guys here. We have a very small number of products because they are so very, very special and have a great deal of research behind them. And they go together. The first three on the left are the core products. The other two are very, very important. And I'll explain to you why they're core and what is so special about them. So hang on to your seat covers, guys. This gets exciting. So, whoops, come on, move forwards. There we go. So for those of you who cannot remember or are not familiar, carnosine is a dipeptide. We naturally find it in the body. And the amount that we have in our body pretty much depends upon our age, our gender, and our diet. So as I've explained earlier, as we get older, we have less in the body. We get very little from our diet. 10% is all you'll get from your diet, and that is from meat. So if you are not a meat eater, then you have a bit of a problem. Carnosine is stored in the body in the places you need it the most. So your brain, your skeletal muscles, and your heart. And if you think about it, as you get older, what are the things that break down? Your brain gets a bit addled. You can't remember what you're supposed to be doing. Your skeletal muscles feel less vital. You're not as strong. And unfortunately, your heart starts to behave erratically and do things that get people very, very worried. Now, the problem is carnosine is very, very poorly absorbed. And I will go on to explain why that is very shortly. So there are many biological functions of carnosine. These are the main ones. And again, you can now see why it's so incredibly important not to be running out of it as you get older. Carnosine is the greatest buffer of lactic acid in the body. It is absolutely the athlete's friend. So if they, if they want to train harder, go longer, it's going to protect them from that lactic acid. It's going to ensure those muscles remain strong for longer. It is phenomenal at chelating heavy metals, arsenic, lead, mercury, cadmium. It does a very gentle chelate on all of those, and people don't seem to get side effects, which is lovely. It's tremendous at scavenging free radicals, so it's got great antioxidant potential. It's phenomenal for inhibiting protein glycation, so great for diabetics. If you've got a sugar that is attached to a protein, the carnosine can actually separate those two, repair the protein, and allow that to go on and do its job. So you'll find that if people take it and they're diabetic, they will use less insulin and they will be a lot more efficient with that. It's great for inhibiting protein carbonylation. So there you've got aldehydes being attached to proteins, great for liver stuff. Super for neurotransmitters. It's very protective of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Neurotransmitters. So if you're thinking about Alzheimer's, dementia, fabulous for those. I've actually had dementia patients who are beginning to forget the names of their children. They've already forgotten what their grandchildren's names are. And over a couple of months of taking the carnosine, these memories and things are coming back. So that's really super. It's also phenomenal for MS, and I'll explain why shortly. And it's great for the reduction of anti-inflammatory effect of cytokine interleukin 8. So it does an awful lot of things and is very valuable to the body. So this is what we want all of our mitochondria to look like all of the time. And we want to feel like that, young, full of energy, very few harmful free radicals. Unfortunately, as we get older and we start to break down, we start to look a lot more like this chap on the right, producing a lot more harmful free radicals and feeling very unhappy. But now we have the answer. And this next slide, I get so excited about. So I said to you that carnosine was very poorly absorbed. When you buy carnosine over the counter, you see this little red line here? That's your carnosine you get over the counter. It is in and out of the body in an hour and a half to 2 hours. And the reason for that is that we have an enzyme in the blood called carnosinase, and when it comes into contact with carnosine, it degrades it. Hence, it doesn't stay in the body for very long. And when you think about all those amazing biological functions that we've just been through, staying in the body for an hour and a half to 2 hours hasn't got very long to do much. So an amazing group of scientists got together many years ago. It became their life's work. It took them just under 15 years. And they discovered a way to stop carnosinase from breaking down carnosine. The result is Karnozin Extra. it stays in the body for up to 12 hours, which is huge, because what that means is that you now have the potential to regenerate at a level that your years of age wouldn't normally allow. In other words, we get to grow old disgracefully, which is what I intend to do, and I will never stop taking it, because the difference between having it and not is chalk and cheese. I mean, I do 100 hours a week, I have a sense of humor, it's not a problem, and I can respond to situations instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, because the stress levels on my body are low and my regeneration factor is high. So it is phenomenal. So nothing would be complete at the moment without the mention of the dreaded COVID-19. It was very, very interesting, because earlier this year, a group of scientists got together and wrote a paper on whether carnosine would be a good method of treating COVID-19. And there are a few reasons for this. Carnosine is very widely available. It's very safe, and it's available without a prescription. One of the common features of all virus-induced human diseases is the sustained increase in nitric oxide. And this, as you're familiar, forms a very highly toxic and reactive peroxynitrate, which then damages the lung tissues and the DNA. Now, because carnosine has tremendous antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, it can reduce the concentrations of peroxynitrate, it can reduce the nitric oxide, and therefore it's phenomenal at aiding the fight against viruses. And this has already been proven with influenza A, dengue fever, and Zika virus. So that's really something to bear in mind at the moment. The other thing that a lot of people may not be familiar with is that COVID-19 occurs more frequently among apolyprotein E genotypes, and APOE genes are highly expressed in the alveoli cells in the lungs, and carnosine has been shown to show a very protective role in APOE positive carriers. So it's a really important piece of information for some people. Now, what gets me excited is their conclusions. So the authors suggested that carnosine can be potentially promising agent in the global management of COVID-19, with particular benefit in mitigating the comorbidities associated with COVID-19. Now, bear in mind, when the scientists put this paper together, they were only looking at a carnosine that stayed in the body for 1.5 to 2 hours. Remember that Karnozin Extra stays in the body for 12 hours, and look at their conclusion. Oral administration of carnosine may play an important role in reducing lung tissue damage, morbidity, and mortality associated with SARS-CoV-2 infection. The administration of L-carnosine to COVID-19 patients may be helpful in managing this disease and may be helpful in offsetting the burden on healthcare systems, particularly in low-income countries that are struggling with finances and the high cost of medical care. Now, knowing that we're going to be coming into probably a second wave, as all the governments keep promising, I think this is hugely valuable. And with you as practitioners, this is certainly worth bearing in mind. So we've mentioned nitric oxide. And if you're making nitric oxide, it then goes on to create peroxynitrite. So we'd already done these studies well before COVID ever came around. So they looked at the inhibition of the nitric oxide radical, and they took pure L-carnosine of 125 milligrams, and they did the same thing with a carnosine, which was a well-known brand. That had an inhibition factor of about 9% against our Karnozin Extra, which has got over 40%, which is just huge. And you can't really argue with that. It kind of says what it does on the tin. So the other bit of research we had is the hydroxyl radical. Again, we can show that we can make a big impact there. So if you take normal pure L-carnosine, again, 125 milligrams, and another brand, their inhibition factor of the hydroxyl radical was about 42%, as opposed to ours, Karnozin Extra, 71%. And when you consider that the hydroxyl radical is a highly unstable radical, and it damages virtually every tissue in the body, from carbohydrates to nucleic acids, lipids, amino acids, it's probably one of the most reactive radicals known in chemistry. So this is actually really, really important. Lipid peroxidation, again, you know, phenomenal if you've got somebody who's diabetic. Again, 125 milligrams. So the pure L-carnosine gave about a 5% inhibition factor, or neutralization, should we say. The other brand came out at 8.7. And then you've got our lovely Karnozin Extra coming in there at about 50% or 54%, I think it is on there. So again, there's no argument there as to how it can support people across the board. And now you can understand how it's giving the body the ability to regenerate by making sure these things don't get in and cause havoc in the body. So my clinical experience of this has been massive. Remember all of the practices that I started over the next 18 months of being trained. It seriously has been, and it still is today after, oops, I'm now the host, I've got to admit somebody, yes. Who am I admitting? Hang on, somebody's, no, I don't want to remove somebody. Sorry, I've just seen somebody's trying to get in. I think we're okay. Waiting room, here we go. Sorry about that. It's the trouble with being a host. You've got to do two things at the same time. Right, so yeah, absolutely the most exciting thing that I've come across in over 20 years, and still is 5 years later, particularly with the fact that I can measure the results that are going on. It's been the biggest practice builder I've ever had, and chronic cases really start to move in a meaningful way in a very short period of time. And this is why my practice went completely bonkers. And the big areas that I saw changes in: diabetes, cardiovascular disorders, chronic fatigue, autism, MS, and atherosclerosis. And the reason the cases that were slow to move historically suddenly started moving is for this reason. Now, you've all had somebody who sits in front of you who has probably been to see half a dozen other practitioners, and they go, it doesn't matter what I do, nothing works. And they've been to a number of practitioners and they go, I have a list this long of problems. And if it's a doc, he'll go, well, I've done the blood test and they've come back fine. There's nothing wrong and you need to go and see a shrink, which is about the most insulting thing you can say to somebody who's seriously got some issues. We all know people who that's been said to, and your heart can only go out to them. But the reason why that blood test and didn't come up with anything, and every supplement they've taken didn't work, is the following. The person's receptors in the body are blocked, broken, and damaged. The carnosine, within a matter of days, is going to go in and it's going to repair all the protein structures. It's going to clean out all the receptors. It's going to resensitize the receptors, and it's going to encourage a much greater production of ATP. So now they've got the power to get after it. The trouble is the body, having cleaned out all the receptors, suddenly goes, oh my Lord, I didn't realize that we were in this pickle. Right, you go and fix this, patch this, oil this, repair that, and you will find people are noticing within days stuff happening. Some people notice it at about 4 to, most people who take the supplements who haven't got anything wrong with them or just want more energy will notice it around 4 weeks. But for people who've got chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, they're going to notice it in days. And this is what is so very exciting. So let me show you a little bit of the research so you can understand a little bit more of what's going on here. So they did a study on MS. What happened was they were, a lot of these supplements were going out. It originally came out of Serbia. And they were getting people who were beginning to say, I've been in a wheelchair for X amount of time, and I'm now finding that I can get out of my wheelchair and I can use my sticks. And it happened enough times that the company went, something's going on here and we have to find out what's going on. So as you know, in MS, you've got gaps in the myelin sheath. And so the connections can't go through. So they did a study where they took 3 groups of mice. You have your control, you have your mice that are taking 2 lots of capsules a day, or the equivalent for a mouse, and the group that were taking 6. There were no differences observed in the mice who were on the control or taking 2 capsules. But the group of mice that were on the equivalent of 6 capsules per day had less demyelinated areas, less inflammation compared to the control group. And this is what is making the difference. We know now that you can protect the myelin sheath and you can help bring that inflammation down and help regrow myelin sheath if you've got a minimum of 6 capsules a day. Most of my patients are taking more than that who have MS, but more exciting, and for those of you who are used to research will know, having no histological, morphological, and functional changes on high doses of a product in the liver, gut, kidney, brain, heart, spleen, pancreas, and testes tissues is phenomenal, particularly the kidneys, because the kidneys are so incredibly sensitive to other supplements. So this is a tremendous bit of research. And they've now gone on to do a human study on MS, which if people are interested at some point, I can share with them. So reproductive health. How many chaps, you know, walk around with their phone in their front pocket? It's not helpful. We want to maintain as much as we can of the crown jewels because those chaps we are relying on for our future. But there is a silver lining here. Carnosine is absolutely incredible for increasing sperm count and increasing sperm motility. It is also fabulous for ladies who are facing fertility issues. In fact, it's so good that I have a caveat with all of my patients who are on a mitochondrial rescue protocols, because they are so effective that I have to say, if you have had enough children and you don't want any more, please take contraception, because we have had a number of surprises. One lady I will never forget, bless her, she was in her mid to late 40s. She was perimenopausal and basically going, no, I don't often have periods. We're all fine. We don't need to worry about this. And she rings me one day and goes, Lilias, I think I'm pregnant. And I went, okay, have you done a test? And she went, no. I said, I think you better do one. I got a phone call 2 or 3 days later and I got going, I am pregnant. And the result of this was weeks later, it was confirmed that she was pregnant with twins. This lady is in her mid-40s. She's got 3 grown-up children. She doesn't want any more. And her husband's going, I'm just so potent. And this was not what she was expecting. And I said, sorry, guys, you were just taking the carnosine. You should have been taking your protection. And you'll also find that there are women who have, they think they finished their periods and they haven't had any for maybe 9 months or a year, and suddenly they're on the carnosine for 9 months and they're going, oh my Lord, I didn't realize this was going to happen. And the carnosine will literally scrape out the bottom of the barrel and go, we've got more potential here, and the person will start having the odd period. So this is incredible for reproduction. Don't treat it lightly. Bear that in mind should you start using these products. Some other very exciting research. I told you it's very neurologically protective. And this for me is very, very exciting. So stroke is probably the 3rd cause of age-related death in the USA. 500,000 people suffer from stroke in the USA every year, and 80% of those are from ischemic stroke. Even though the symptoms of stroke are mainly neurological, the cause of stroke usually lies in the vascular pathology of the brain arteries. So when a stroke occurs, there are areas of the brain that are very affected by hypoxia, and there is nothing that can be done for those cells that are dead. However, when the cells that are surrounded by the hypoxic area are still alive, but they're no longer able to function because they don't have the energy, the Karnozin Extra can change that. And if we feed those cells with enough carnosine, then there is an improvement in the function of the patients. Those cells can be regenerated and to whatever potential they've got left, which means those patients are going to get some function back. So if you look at the graph, you will see that the white areas are pre-treated rats who are going through an ischemic event, and the black areas are the control. So you can see how much protection people have if they are on carnosine, should they have a stroke, or if we can give it to them immediately post a stroke, you can rescue some of that tissue where they wouldn't normally have the power to regenerate, which is very, very exciting. They also did a study in the natural science faculty in Novi Sad in the Department of Molecular Biology, and they gave rats Karnozin Extra, which was the equivalent of for 2 months, and which is about a 6-year lifestyle for a rat. And they just let them play. They just let them move, and they had a control group, and they had the mice that were enjoying the Karnozin Extra, and they were able to record their physical activity every 6 minutes, every day, day and night for 60 days, which is a colossal thing to do. Obviously, they had some very highly sophisticated software. And what they discovered when the data came in is that the rats that were enjoying the carnosine actually moved of their own volition more by 40%. So we could all do with 40% more extra power. I'm living testament of it. And it's just phenomenal. And, you know, they weren't asking them to go on a treadmill. They were going on it because they wanted to. So moving on from the carnosine, I said that we had a few other products. So the Q10 is the product that is powering the carnosine. These are the ingredients, and life without CoQ10 simply isn't possible. It's very much part of the electron transport chain. Q10 is found in every single cell in the body. And again, the highest concentrations of Q10 are in the areas where you need it the most, for your heart, your brain, and your liver. And as most of you should be aware, it is the only fat-soluble antioxidant that is synthesized and found in humans. This is all of the wonderful things that Q10 does, which is why everybody post-30 should be taking some, because it's beginning to fall away. And now you can understand why, you know, if it does fall away, people are going to start to exhibit some of these problems. It's absolutely huge. I won't go through the list. It's pretty obvious there. So what I wanted to show you was how Q10 declines with age. And what most people don't realize is that a lot of the Q10 you buy over the counter is synthetic. It's bioidentical, and they put 9, 10, 11, and 12 in. But the trouble is the human body can only see CoQ10. So it's really, really important. And as I said, the Q10 is necessary to be used in conjunction with the carnosine to give the carnosine the power to regenerate you. And essentially, it makes you dig deeper, go further, go longer. Now, the caveat here, this stuff is absolute rocket fuel. So if you have a really sensitive client, I say to most of my normal patients, don't take it later than 7 p.m. Otherwise, you'll be up all night unless you've got a party to go to or a thesis to write. But my really sensitive clients will literally take their last dose at midday, and they're done for the day. The stamina complex is hugely, hugely important. The reason for that is receptors. Remember, I said to you at the beginning, the receptors are going to get cleaned out in the body. They're going to get resensitized. So now the body can see all the inflammation in the body, and it can see all of the bits that the body couldn't see beforehand. And that can be fairly uncomfortable. So the stamina complex, with its hugely potentized beta-glucans, is able to bring down inflammation in the body. The beta-glucans very much act on a weakened immune system. They stimulate macrophages, they contribute to faster wound healing, and they speed up the recovery after surgery. So really, really super to have on board. They are also fundamental. We have a jet lag protocol, and this enables people to get on airplanes, hopefully that we're going to get the opportunity to do so soon, and get from one place to another without coming back with everybody else's cough, cold, flu from the journey. So very, very important indeed. Why do we need it? It's great for infections, chemotherapy, inflammatory diseases, digestive problems, chronic fatigue, and the list goes on. We wouldn't be without it. It's one of our main things. And lastly, but not least, we have a colostrum, and we use this. This is very special because it's 4-hour-old colostrum. You can't say that for many colostrums. It's 4-hour-old colostrum from organic cattle, cows. It's very special indeed. There's a herd that is used specifically for this. And colostrum, not everybody uses it, but it's tremendous for resistance of infection in the body. It keeps the immune system in balance. Fabulous for global delay in children. It's great for athletes because it increases endurance and physical parameters of the body. It accelerates recovery after injury. If you imagine what an athlete does, they're tearing up the muscles the whole time, so it's great for them. Super for digestion, helps prevent malignancy. But the thing with colostrum, obviously, it's casein. So if you've got somebody who is casein intolerant, this is not the product for them. And lastly, but not least, we have our fabulous Cruciferous Extra. Now, a lot of the celebrity gurus and celebrity doctors are at the moment are going, you've got to get your cruciferous veg in. You need to be taking sulforaphane for COVID-19. Sulforaphane, we wanted to call this product sulforaphane, but the FDA wouldn't allow us because sulforaphane is compounded when broccoraphin, which is what you get from Cruciferous Extra, joins an enzyme in the gut called myrosinase. Now, the trouble is, most Cruciferous Extra plant-based glucoraphin that you buy as sulforaphane over the counter, it's relying on you having the enzyme myrosinase in your gut so that it can turn into sulforaphane. And the last time I looked, most people who are really sick don't have many enzymes in the gut, so the product goes in one end, comes out the other, and is completely useless. Our Cruciferous Extra is very special. It's been created by a lady called Katerina Horokova, and she was the lady who discovered the sulforaphane molecule 40 years ago. And so understanding that the majority of people do not have the myrosinase enzyme in their gut when they're not well, it has been formulated in the capsule to have the myrosinase enzyme in the capsule. So the minute you swallow it, you are getting all of the lovely effects of sulforaphane. So if you don't know what sulforaphane does, it's fabulous. Look at this list. It promotes detoxification. It lowers cholesterol. It's fabulous for your heart. It improves diabetes, the immune system, bacterial infections, and so it goes on. But what it's known for is how it can prevent and combat cancer, which is very beautifully shown in many research papers. So I advise anybody over 40 who's got a really stressful life, who's maybe got cancer in the family, to be taking it on a daily basis, because a pound of prevention is a lot better than 100 of cure. Now, I love this image. And you can see as we start at 20 years of age, as I said, we've got lots of vitality, we're fantastic with energy, but as we get older, that energy decreases and our risk of morbidity increases. And the beautiful thing is when you've got the mitochondrial rescue protocols on board, as I said, they give you the potential to regenerate at a level that your years of age wouldn't normally allow. So you can decrease those yellow bars significantly, have a great deal less morbidity, and a great deal more regeneration and energy potential, which is actually what we all want. Now, at the beginning, I mentioned heart rate variability, and we say results you can measure. And that's for a really good reason. I came across this heart rate variability at the same time as a supplement, so they came together. And through using this, it's been very powerful, because what you see in a person sitting in front of you and what you hear from their patient history and what actually is happening when you measure them can be two very different things. And this machine is the difference between having an idea, saving a life, and changing a life. And I will show you that in a few minutes. So for those of you who are not familiar, heart rate variability is exactly what it says on the tin. We're looking at the variability of the timing between heartbeats. So as you can see from here, there are different numbers of seconds, and the greater the variability, the greater the health of the person. So why is the Varicard heart rate variability so vastly superior? Let me explain this. If you had a Fitbit or an Oura Ring or one of the wearables, the information that you will get is purely from an optical signal, and it's going to give you information at around maybe 70 to 100 cycles per second. If you had a hobby heart rate variability device, the bandwidth on that is probably about 70 to 300 cycles per second. If you've got a machine in a doctor's surgery or a hospital, which is a lot more sophisticated, it gives you much better actionable data, you're going to be getting information at probably around 900 to 1,000 cycles per second, which is pretty good. You get quite a bit of information on that. But the Varicard is a completely different ball game. It's in a different stratosphere, and you'll understand from the research behind it in a second. It's taking information at around 16 cycles per second, which is being reduced down and interpolated to 2,000 bits per second. So now you can see the amount of bandwidth and the information you're going to get from this machine is vastly superior and different from anything else you're going to ever see. Dr. McCullough stood on stage at the ACIM conference in November in front of about 400 to 600 doctors and stated that this was the best heart rate variability machine he had ever seen. He's using it himself now, and he stood on stage and said we were the most exciting thing that he'd seen that year. So we were hugely excited by his recommendations for us. So very simply, the lower your heart rate variability, the more physically stressed you will be and the tireder you will be. The higher your heart rate variability, the less physiologically stressed you'll be and the more ability you will have to perform and function and be at your optimal. And this is what we're looking for. So to understand how heart rate variability works, it's measuring your functional state. It is measuring the stress on your system, your body's ability to adapt to stress, and your autonomic nervous system has everything it needs to tell it how it's going on. So your sympathetic, your fight or flight, your parasympathetic, all of these areas have receptors that are constantly firing information to the brain going, run faster, go to sleep, eat more, put a coat on. Gosh, he's drop dead gorgeous. All of these signals are coming through your receptors, and that is what is going to be picking up a lot of the signals. This is what a report looks like on Varicard, and all of these little images here are graphical images and pictures of the information in the central box, which is what we describe to our clients. And the difference, the other thing that sets this apart from most other HRV machines is the fact that this, where it says index of centralization, is your hypothalamus. There are very few machines out there that measure the hypothalamus, and this is very, very important indeed. So essentially what this machine, what you're looking at on here is how much power have you got? And this is a total power function, 1627. Where is it going and what is it doing? You've got your autonomic nerve, so you've got your parasympathetic, sympathetic, your limbic system and your VLF, and then you've got your stress figures up here. And I'm not going to go through all of that now, but it's very, very comprehensive. It's one page, it's easy. Your patients will love it. So what also sets this machine apart is its history. And this is super, super important. And I want you to understand this because we all of us as practitioners owe a debt of gratitude and thanks to a guy called Vasily Vasilyevich Parin. He was the father of space medicine. His career started in 1925. He died in 1971, age 68. But he was responsible for having the science and creating it for Yuri Gagarin to be the first man in orbit on the 12th of April, 1961. And they were looking at the time at how could they monitor the most elite individuals under extreme stress, forgive me. And I want you to understand what extreme stress means. This wasn't about measuring sick people. This was about measuring the most elite people. This is the capsule that Yuri Gagarin went round his first orbit of the Earth. Can you imagine what his body must have been going through in that ball? He had to eject out of the center here, and his parachute got caught up on this bit here, and he had to actually, whilst he was coming down, cut himself away from this. Otherwise, he would have been dragged down to Earth. This actually bounced 3 times before it came to a standstill. I can't think of anything more terrifying. This is what the capsule actually looks like. It's in the Moscow Museum. We've been to see it, and you can see here a mock-up of the capsule that he had to eject out of the center here. So all of his vital signs were being measured as he went round. And this is the very beginnings of what heart rate variability is today. Here is Yuri Gagarin. He's being measured here for his first pre-check flights for going around in the orbit. And heart rate variability started here. So here is a bicycle in a tube. I mean, they had to start with basics. They didn't know what they were doing. Bicycle in a tube filled with charcoal dust or coal dust. And they were looking at respiration. And all of these other things fed into the very simple instruments they had at the time. And that is how they started measuring stress. And this is how heart rate variability began, by some very, very brave men. So here you have in the center here, Yuri Gagarin having done his amazing flight. Here is Vasily Vasilyevich Parin. He's an older, he's an older man here. And he hands over all of his research to this guy at the back here, who's sitting behind him. So I'm trying to get my cursor to go here. There we go. This guy is called Roman Markovich Bayevsky, and he's the guy that goes on to create the machinery and heart rate variability that we know today, with a guy called Yuri Nikolaevich Semenov, who is the man who has created the Vericar 2.5. I have been to Russia. I have met him, all through an interpreter. Great fun. But this is the provenance of this machine. It's not something that was brought about in the last 10 years. It's got 40 or 50 years of solid research and mathematical equations behind it. So it's extraordinary. So what did they discover through space medicine? Well, they discovered the autonomic nervous system plays a massive role in our adaptation to stress. Heart rate variability is absolutely the very best method of studying vegetative regulation of blood circulation. They discovered that the cardiovascular system is the biggest indicator of the adaptive reaction on the body as a whole. And in 1966, Vasily Parin held the first symposium on the mathematical analysis of heart rate variability in Moscow, with over 50 papers presented. And it was at that time that Roman Bayevsky was very much involved. So you can see the provenance of this is huge. So they were looking to get people into space. They were looking at how they can measure stuff. And this is where carnosine comes in again. So remember, you were 16, you were invincible. You had carnosine roaring around your body the whole time, and then it gradually started to drop off. When you go into space, your body ages a year roughly, and your organs age at different levels. Your body ages about a year for every month you spent in space. So they reckoned, and it's been suggested, that the human body needs 300 milligrams of carnosine per kilo of body weight every 2 hours. So if you took a 75 kilo chap and you wanted to make sure that he had 300 milligrams every 2 hours, you would need, if you took over-the-counter capsules of carnosine, roughly you'd need about 500 capsules every 2 hours. That's 3,000 capsules a day to give you your potential. It's impossible. You could never do it. So they had to find a solution. And this is where the research came in for the carnosine to stop it from being degraded in the presence of carnosinase. On one of the reports, you saw maybe in the right-hand corner this little graphic. And this graphic, some very brilliant scientists worked on developing the mathematical relationships for the analysis of the heart rate variability to graphically represent the results in a very easily and understandable format. This particular format and the validation of it took them 10 years to create, because the mathematical equations behind it and the research was so vast. So this is huge. So the upshot of this is some case studies. I want to show you what the combination of the supplements and being able to measure what you're doing does. So I want you to bear in mind these numbers, even jot them down. So these are really big risk numbers, and it'll make more sense to you when I show you some of these cases. So heart rate above 100 is a major no-no. SDNN is the balance of your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. SDNN, so above 100 or below 10 is the risk of a heart attack. CV above 15 is risk of a stroke. IC, index of centralization, below normal gives you burnout or depression. Stress index under 50 or over 1,000 is a heart attack number, and total power under 50 is also a significantly dangerous number. Now let me introduce you to probably the most interesting case I have ever had in all the years I've been doing this. If you get one of these walking in your door, you will be very blessed, and so will the patient. So I was at the Orlando A4M show in last year. I think it was about March, April time, I can't remember. Anyhow, this guy walks over to us. So at the A4M show, there's tons of doctors walking around, all very learned, brilliant guys. And this guy walks up to us. He's grey around the gills. He's sweating over his top lip. He's not looking good. He's got his hand on his heart. And he goes, I really feel very unwell. I've got a problem with my heart. I can see you doing heart rate variability. Could you run a test on me now? And you only had to look at him to realize we needed to. So sat him down, and the results were horrific. And he said before he sat down, by the way, my results are going to be horrific. I was struck by lightning twice. Now, I've never met anybody who's been struck by lightning once, let alone twice, but being British and having a bit of a sense of humor, my response to that was, well, it was very careless of you to get in the way the second time. So this is what the result looked like. Remember those numbers I asked you to take a note of. So his heart rate was coming in at 43. It shouldn't be higher than 75. His standard deviation balanced between parasympathetic and sympathetic shouldn't be higher than 69, is coming in at 1,063. So you've got two heart attack numbers there. His coefficient variation is above 15, it's 76. There's a stroke number. His stress index is coming in at 2. There's a heart attack number. And his total power, which we want to be between 1,000 and 2,000, is coming in at 729,500 odd. This man is dying in front of us, literally. And being a doc, knowing a little bit about heart rate variability, he took one look at the screen and said, I knew it would get me one day. And I went, not on my watch. We'd never treated lightning before, but we've done a lot. This stuff is phenomenal with hearts. We have a lot of cardiovascular surgeons and cardiovascular doctors using it. So I immediately gave him a very large quantity of Karnozin Extra, which we broke open under his tongue. Told him to hold it there with some water a little bit and swallow it. We gave him a very large dose of Q10, did the same thing. There was no point in him going to hospital because there's nothing they could do. We made him sit on the chair and not leave for half an hour until we could see everything had diminished a little bit. We gave him a very big dose to take away with him to have that night and to take the following morning. I want you to look at the time on here. It is 4 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. So he goes away. We're hoping and praying that he makes it through to the next day. And he comes back at 11 o'clock the next morning. His heart's now 71. He was well over 100. His standard deviation is coming in at 58. It was well over 1,000. It was 1,063. His stress index is now 58. It was 2. The index of centralization is the hypothalamus. Yesterday, when it was all going bonkers, his hypothalamus had absolutely no idea what was going on. It was just going, yeah, I'm fine, I'm cruising, I'm 1.2. Today it's gone, what the heck just happened? And it's coming in at 19, which is a huge number for this area. And his total power is now an acceptable 2,816 instead of several hundred thousand. And that is in less than 24 hours. We saved that man's life. He knows it. He's gone on to become one of our best practitioners. So we now know that we can treat lightning. And he was saying he'd been for 10 years trying to find a fix to his problem. And we now know that we can. So if you ever have any lightning cases, bear this in mind. I don't know whether you get any cases of atrial fibrillation. I had a 70-year-old lady, actually ironically was a cardiovascular nurse. The only solution to her was to have her heart restarted. And she said, I'm not having it done. I've seen it happen too often. The heart goes back to its irregularity after about 18 months of heart surgery. I'm not having it done. She literally couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without stopping and breathing, and she was married to a doctor who had no idea she was coming to see me for a year. And she was adamant that these protocols weren't going to do anything for her. So this is what her stuff looked like. So you can see this is, every blue dot here is a heartbeat. It's not clever. She's coming in here. This is a very serious place to be. Her standard deviation, which is the balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic, is 137. It's not funny. Her arrhythmias are coming in at 9.3. An acceptable level is 0.5. When you get to 4, you should be seeing a cardiologist. So this is really not a clever test at all. We put her on the supplements. 8 weeks later, we've got significant improvements. She's far less likely to have a heart attack. The arrhythmias are down from 9.3 to 6.7, with 0.5 being an acceptable value. And that test looked like that. Can you see how this grouping has come together? Can you see how this is looking better? It's still horrible, but it's looking a lot better. And when you're on the carnosine and you have atrial fibrillation, the heart is no longer being damaged by the atrial fibrillation. It is now protected. So that was 2 months later. 1 year later, her system stabilized. She's literally trotting up and down stairs. She's redecorating a house. I mean, this is amazing. She's 71 now. And her arrhythmias have come down to 3.5. You have to see a cardiologist if they're over 4. And her doctor, her husband, who's a doctor still to this day, has no idea she ever came to see me. But look at this. It's lovely. It's not where I want it to be, but for her at her age, she's in a much safer place, and she's not going to check out anytime soon of a heart attack because the numbers are far better. So it's extraordinary. Chronic fatigue, something that you guys will be dealing with a lot. This case is a case I'll never forget. This is a 51-year-old lady. She and her sister were very close. They both suffered the most horrific satanic abuse. And it was that bad that obviously there were a lot of psychological problems. Her sister developed cancer and died a year previously to my seeing her. This lady had tried everything. She was clearly more resilient, and basically she had nothing to lose and had been trying to beat this for most of her life. She's now 51 years of age. This is what her thing looked like, her report. When you get a line that's very, very straight along the cardiovelogram, it's basically telling you that everything's very, very tightly controlled. There is no other resources. She's got a total power of 333. I wanted to have 1,500 to 2,000. So you can see she's literally got 1.5 hands tied behind her back, and she's trying to spin 10 plates, and she hasn't got any resources. And she's been like that for many, many years. So we give her the mitochondrial rescue protocols. She comes back 8 weeks later saying she's never felt better. She has no aches, no pains, no brain fog. She just needed the power to heal. Remember, I said this is a new paradigm. Don't treat labels, just give the body the power it needs to heal. And this is what her report looked like 8 weeks later. So she's now in the green. She's got fabulous power, from 333 to 1,787. And this is what I want for everybody. So this is absolutely fantastic. So this really, as I say, this changes a lot of people's lives. So without further ado, I invite you to come and join us as practitioners. Come and change the lives and save the lives of many of your patients, because you will do it if you combine the Mitochondrial Rescue protocols with the heart rate variability. You won't see a lot of this stuff if you haven't got the heart rate variability. That said, it isn't always for everybody. So we have a light training, which involves 3 lectures, a lot of support from myself. I have a fabulous business partner who is in Florida. His name is Dr. Suresh Raja. He's a very, very brilliant ear, nose, and throat surgeon, very revered by many people. He works with me in the States. He will, being in the States, he will support you. I will support you over Skype, Zoom, and WhatsApp in this country. If you would like to explore doing the comprehensive training with the heart rate variability, there are 7 lectures to listen to. Most people get it done in a week. There's a bit of practical training, which you get to speak to me quite a lot over WhatsApp and Zoom, or Dr. Raja. And in both instances, you can have a Mitochondrial Rescue supplement account. But yeah, it's phenomenal. It's life-changing. It's the biggest practice builder I've ever seen. It puts a smile on so many faces. And at the end of the day, we all want our mojo back. We all want to regenerate. We all want to grow old in a disgraceful way, laughing and smiling to our last breath, and not going, you run along, you young things, I need to have a nap. No, hell no. I want to get out there and have fun. And these protocols give you the potential to do that. So I hope that has been helpful and interesting. And if anybody has any questions, I'm all ears.